Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to this segment of Coach Gurbani's a-sabad-a-day. We continue with our recitation of Gauri Mahalla Panjwa. This Shabad is the 104th in that series, and is recited as follows. Gauri Mahalla Panjwa, Agam Rup ka man meh Thana, गुर प्रसाद किने विरलै जाना, सहज कथा के अमृत कुंटा, जिसह परापत तिस लै पुंचा रहाओ, अनहत बाणी थान निराला, ताकी धुनी मोहे गोपाला, तह सहज अखारे अनेक अनंता, पार ब्रह्म के संगी संता, हरख अनंत सोग नहीं बिया, सो घर गुर नानक को दिया। अगम रूप का मन मह थाना, गुर प्रसाद किने विरलै जाना. Rare is the individual who, through Guru wisdom, learns to presence the self within. We have used the word presence because the self within is really inaccessible to the senses. It is of infinite forms, yet inaccessible. Agam Rup ka man mein Thana. It is within. Man mein Thana. Thana refers to a space. It's dwelling. It abides within. But it is of infinite forms and yet of no form, and that's the paradox of the self. Rare is the individual who actually learns to presence the self within. Sahaj katha ke amrit kunta, jiseh parapat tis lai puncha. And here's the way to do it. The Guru says, those who listen to the exposition of Sahaj Katha, the indescribable narrative, those who listen to that indescribable narrative with one pointed concentration, Kunta. Kunta is a spear or a lance and is symbolic of being one pointed in one's concentration. So if one heeds to the instruction of the Guru with one pointed attention, with one pointed devotion, then this experience, Jaisah Parapat Tislah Puncha, then one experiences the self within. So we understand that the self within, which has been identified here as Agam Rup, formless, inaccessible to the senses. This self is experienced when one absorbs the instruction of the Satgur, the Gur. So the Gur or the Satgur is really an exponent of Sahaj. The exposition that is articulated is that of Sahaj. That is the state or condition of the mind where there is no wave, that is in balance. It is required to experience the transcendent. To be in Sahaj then is to really experience Amrit, transcendental consciousness. So what we are talking about here, Man mein Thana, Gur Prasad kine virle jana, it is talking about the rare experience of universal consciousness, a consciousness that has pierced through the ego. That really is the exercise that we are all on, is how do we achieve that state of consciousness within the mind. And as things stand, we actually have no clue, because we don't really know what we are dealing with in our ordinary state of experience. So therefore, visualization, imagination plays a huge role in how we establish the self within, how we find it. And the Guru points to that by saying, Anhat bani Thana niralla taki dhuni mohe gopala. Thana niralla. Niralla means unusual. It also signifies the sky in poetry. It is essentially pointing to an unfragmented space, one that is not disjointed. And so Than Nirala refers to consciousness that is not ego consciousness, because ego consciousness is fragmented. It fails to see the interdependence and the connectivity behind all diversity. It just does not sense it, doesn't see it, doesn't have that capacity. It doesn't see the potential behind all things. It just sees the very obvious. And it is beyond the obvious that we have to travel. So therefore, Than Niralla, to that space where there is no fragmentation of the ego, of the consciousness rather. And what does that mean? It means where the mind understands and gains a foothold in its source. Taki dhuni mohe gopala. That space, that place, the Guru says, is mesmerizing. Mohe gopala. Gopala, of course, refers to the self, to the master, the owner of the universe. And then the other expression here is Anhat-bani. Anhat-bani translates literally to unstruck sound, but it symbolizes rather the energy of transcendental consciousness. This is a state of consciousness where the self is experienced. And sound, shabad, is that reflective awareness. It is the energy of that consciousness. So when it becomes self-conscious, when the mind becomes aware of itself, it assumes the form of what is called Anhatabani, unstruck sound. It is not then manifested in individual phenomes or energies of speech like the one that is being said now, but it begins to relate to the underlying emissive power of consciousness. It goes beyond mere words. And that is where Sahaj is. That is Sahaj. But the Guru says, in that space, there, in that state of Sahaj, are like-minded sants, the perfected ones. This includes the Satgur. And they are really the true companions of Parabrahm. Parabrahm ke sangi santa. So the third verse reads, Teh sahaj akhare anek ananta Parabrahm ke sangi santa. There, in that state of Sahaj, like-minded saints gather as companions to the Supreme Self. Now, this would suggest to us that ultimate reality is really plural, a collective. That's just a suggestion, but think about it. And the Guru concludes by saying, Harak anant sog nahi biya. This is the state of that consciousness. In a state of consciousness where there is unlimited joy and no sorrow. Harak anant, unlimited joy. Sog nahi, no sorrow. Biya, felt. So kar gure Nanak ko diya. Nanak's mind has found its footing, kar, in that state of consciousness. Kar, of course, we refer to ordinarily as house, but it also means a place where you have a footing, a foothold. So here, Guru Nanak is speaking about consciousness and is saying through Guru Arjan that Nanak's mind found its footing in that state of consciousness through Gur wisdom. The passage began with, rare is the one who through Gur wisdom presences the self of infinite forms, yet inaccessible. So the inaccessible has become accessible through the experience of transcendent consciousness. These are, of course, words, and words have limitations, and this passage is speaking precisely to the limits of language. So the message for us is that we have to work on our consciousness and actually experience this. Experience what the Gurus are saying, not simply talk about it. On that note, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.